In the land where I was born, there are now women seeking justice. Justice for birth mothers. Oh Lord, hear my prayer.
Thank you for tuning into Justice for Birth Mothers. My name is Anna Kavanagh, co-founder and convener to the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, Ireland's largest non-Tusla funded group advocating on behalf of birth mothers in difficulty with Tusla, the Gardaí and the family court. In today's podcast, I'm chatting to Maura Butterly, a retired social worker. And Maura has been a mentor to the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice since it was set up in June 2019. And indeed, she was at the very first meeting that took place in Athlone. And Maura is retired a number of years, but she has a very, very keen interest in what is currently happening. Maura, could we begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about your work as a social worker in Dublin? And ultimately this led to you working with Alan Shatter to bring about significant changes in the early noughties.
Well, I actually qualified in 1972 as a social worker, and it was the first year actually of professional qualification in social work, PQSW, and I worked in Scotland first of all for a period of time, and then I came back to Ireland in the 70s. And when I came back, it was really the ISCCC was the main social work body at that time, and the health boards were only setting up there. The Eastern Health Board was just developing when I came back, and I moved then from the ISPCC into the Eastern Health Board.
You were based in Dublin, Maura.
I was, yes.
So tell me a little bit about your work and what it involved in those years.
Well, in those years, as I say, it was really the beginning of social work in this country as a profession, and I got to know a lot of people involved, just starting off like myself. Things were only developing, and so it was very basic. There was a lot of interaction between people then. We mixed with solicitors, we mixed with psychiatrists, psychologists, wherever. There was very much an interaction between people way back then, because all of us were learning and all of us were developing, basically with some support, but mainly on our own, actually, more or less.
And tell me, Maura, back in those years, so we're talking about the 80s and 90s.
70s.
Were there children being taken into care in those years?
Oh yes, there were, yes, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, as I say, way back then there were a lot of facilities in local communities set up to try and help keep children with their families. So we very reluctantly would take children into care way back then, and you would have to go to court to get an order. And if you wanted to get a full order, it was a local parentis, so the helper was taking over the care of the child. But very reluctantly, I certainly very reluctantly went to court, and it was only if I had no choice and was forced into going to court. There was very little going to court then, unless you really absolutely had to.
And what about reunifications?
Well, the main goal was reunification back then, obviously. Because there weren't huge facilities around anyway for anybody to be placed. There's some of the industrial schools that you heard about and stuff like that, but there wasn't any major. And there were convents that took in children, of course. Yeah, that's all well known now. But there was no major. The major thinking behind that was to return the children back to their parents, because basically the thinking way back then was that children belong with their parents, and that's the best place they should be.
So if we fast forward then perhaps a decade or more, you became very alarmed about children being trafficked into the sex trade.
Well, when I was training as a social worker in London, the training I did was very basic. It was very practical, and I was out on the streets all the time training. It wasn't sitting in academia for months on end. I was out, and I walked down the Portobello Road. And I saw a lot of stuff going on then with children being trafficked, the whole drug trade was going on there, and a lot of children, some Irish children as well. And I was horrified, and I used to think to myself, thank goodness this isn't going on in Ireland. In my naivety, I thought none of this was going on in Ireland. Then when I went to work in Scotland, I did some night work and I saw it happening there. And then when I came back to Dublin, I worked, and one of the services I worked in, eventually, the last service I worked in was the Out of Hours service, which is now called a Crisis Intervention Service. And I worked through the nights in Dublin. I saw an awful lot of child trafficking, child prostitution, pimping, the whole lot.
So then there were a number of high-profile cases that you became very alarmed about. Tell me a little bit about those.
Well, what happened basically was I saw a lot of children being pimped night after night, and some of these children would have specific needs, all kinds of different kinds of needs. Apart from the fact they were homeless, that was a need, of course. They needed proper protective accommodation and caring accommodation, but also some of them would have specific needs. Some of them, for instance, may have a handicap. Some of them some kind of have a psychological or psychiatric need. And so there were children with all kinds of specific needs out on the streets at night, and we were leaving them on the streets at night because there wasn't the proper facilities, hadn't been developed for them. And in the end, I just, it broke my heart, I have to say that. I still think about it. And a number of those children then started to die on the streets at night. I decided that I would have to try and do something about it. I suppose you could say I went to my own authorities, obviously, first of all, and nothing was being done, and the children were continually on the streets night after night. And as I say, I saw children trafficked through the airports. I sat beside children I knew were being trafficked into this country and through this country, both boys and girls, by the way. And then I saw a lot of boys and girls being trafficked on the streets in this country, for want of a better word. They pimped and prostituted, and I went to the authorities. I went to my own authorities first, and nothing happened, and I was told to keep quiet, basically. That was what it came down to, and I couldn't because I just felt that people should know what's going on and hopefully would make a major change. And in the end, I got involved with there was a Fianna Fáil government in at the time, and Fianna Fáil and Labour and a few people like that in, and I got in touch with the opposition. And in the end, I went to see Alan Shatter, and who was then in the opposition, Fine Gael. And he listened to me, and I knew some of these solicitors and that from way back when I worked with the ISPCC, because firm was connected with the ISPCC. So I knew all these people way back then. So I went to Alan Shatter, and Alan, he listened to me and he talked to me. And a report at that stage, the number of reports had just come out about the children who died on the streets. Children had died in the streets and the reports were buried, and I knew these children. I knew the terrible life they'd gone through in our care, in local parentis, us as parents, as a society. And I decided, I told Alan Shatter, I did go higher up. I actually went to the person who was the Taoiseach at the time, and told him, and I got absolutely nowhere there. So I ended up going to Alan Shatter when he was in opposition, and the report of one of the children, all the reports were not published, but the report of one of the children was published in the terrible life she led, and Alan Shatter read that into the Dáil records, and that sparked a whole lot of interest in what was going on. And I sat on a committee with Alan Shatter. Alan Shatter, they were in opposition, but he set up a committee with a whole number of people to look at, see how they could change things. And I was invited on that committee, and I sat on that committee.
So this was at a time when the health boards were responsible for child welfare. This predated the setting up of Tusla. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah. It was, first of all, it was the Eastern Health Boards, different health boards. I was working with the Eastern Health Board. Then it was the various different boards, the Northern Area Board and all those kind of things. And then it transformed into the HSE.
So we're talking around just before the crash came in 2009, 2010. So yes. Fianna Fáil are in government, yes. Fine Gael are in opposition, yes. And Alan Shatter is the opposition spokesperson on justice. So
no, he was opposition spokesperson on children.
Okay.
In the beginning.
Right.
But there was only a junior minister for children way back then, and in that previous government before Fine Gael came in, and a lot of us felt the need for a proper full department to protect children, and so Fine Gael said they would look into it, and they set up a committee prior to the election, and I was invited on that committee.
Okay, so then the crash came and that Fianna Fáil government collapsed, and a Fine Gael-led coalition government was formed, and Alan Shatter is now minister. So that government then set about the setting up of Tusla, which was one of the recommendations of the committee that you had sat on with Alan Shatter. So tell me about the setting up of Tusla and your views on how it was set up.
Well, the committee that I was on had a number of individuals on it. I was the only frontline social worker on it, but there were other people on it who had an interest in children, and the whole thing was discussed, and it was decided to set up an agency with a full children's minister, a full children's department to protect children. So I was only on that committee, and that was the suggestion we put forward. And then the government got elected in, and Frances Fitzgerald was made the First Minister for Children, not Alan Shatter, and she set up Tusla. And Tusla was not what I thought it was going to be. Tusla turned out to be basically, and they admitted everything, they set it up as a business. And I was shocked when they were talking about business methods, because what business has social workers using children? I'm not saying all of them do it, but this is what's happening. Children are being used as commodities. In any business, you have to have a commodity. And unfortunately, with Tusla, the commodity is children. What had, in my opinion, a department got to do it? Farming out children at private enterprise, sending them off to different people to make money. And I thought, this is all wrong. You should not have children farmed out to private agencies for fostering and whatever else they're doing, in putting children into care in foreign lands and all that. This is all wrong, and I never thought I would see the day where children were used as commodities in this respect. And I just can't get over it. I can understand why a lot of why they can't get ground staff, basic grade social workers, on the basis I wouldn't want to work on an agency that's a business, not a social service anymore. It's a business. And that's the problem with it. And the commodity is children, so they need children to feed into the system they set up. Now, I'm not saying, I want to say this now, sometimes it's necessary, unfortunately, to take children into care. I have to be honest about that, it is. But it's not necessary to take the amount of children, and to have your bottom line is that you take the children into care before you actually, what seems to be happening, before you actually see if the parent is capable of caring for it, or helping to set up facilities, or supporting them in getting themselves together so they can take care of the children, instead of just having this thing that you take them into care and then you deal with it after that. This is what appears to be happening. Children are just taken into care, and then you sort out everything after that. Mostly it seems to be, and I'm not saying some foster parents aren't good either. I'm not saying that, by the way. I think that there's good in everything. But it's the whole principle of it as a business that I just can't get my head around at all. I think social work is lost in this country. It's really, what it is it's a civil service now, and you have a series of rules you abide by, and if you don't by those rules as a social worker, then you're out. You can forget about it.
So, Maura, there's quite a lot there in what you have just said, and the one thing that you have repeated a number of times is that Tusla is set up as a business.
Yes.
And actually that is confirmed by the fact that their annual reports actually say Tusla business plan.
Yeah.
And they will give the year. So
Business methods.
yeah. So it's no, they don't try to cover up the fact that it is set up as a business. And secondly, it is now a multi-million euro business. Tusla's budget is in and around €1 billion annually. And it has become a huge source of employment for middle-class graduates, for lawyers, and so many different other professionals, psychologists and psychiatrists and court experts and so on and so forth. So, as you say, children have to be fed into this system in order for it to be self-sustaining.
Yes.
Because if they didn't have children being fed into the system, then, the whole system would collapse. Now, one of the problems that the mothers have that are contacting ABC is the fact that access to their children in care is very curtailed and ad hoc. Sometimes if a full-term care order has been granted by the courts, the parents might only see the child once or twice a year. And we're getting reports in recent weeks in the run-up to Christmas that parents were looking forward so much to being able to see their children for Christmas, and they're being told and contacted to say that they won't be having that Christmas visit. Now, I suspect this may be due to the fact that there is a huge scarcity of social workers at the minute. And if we look at the figures, the number of social workers in Tusla is actually on the decrease. So you did say there that you're not surprised by the fact that so few people want to go into Tusla to work as a social worker.
Yes, I'm not one bit surprised, because when I set off as a social worker, I set off with the understanding that social work, one, was obviously to care for people. That was the first thing, to support people who are struggling and help them have a voice, and to advocate on their behalf, to protect them and to help them then protect themselves and develop. And that's the way that I saw social work. But what happens now is, as far as I can see, there's a list of instructions when you go into social work. Did you do this? A, B, C, D, and E, and you have to operate in this fashion. Even though you as a person who has some level of empathy and sit and think, well, this is all wrong. I don't feel it should be done that way. You're told to do it this way. There's a whole set of instructions now, because it's a business, so you've got every business has its own rota, and you have a rota there and you have to follow that rota. If you don't follow that rota, you can forget about it. The only other way is that you follow the rota, just keep doing what they tell you to, even though you might in your gut feel this is not right. You have to follow this rota, and then you can get promotion. And once you're out of the direct involvement with the children, then your career takes off and you're away on a hack there. But in terms of anybody who's really any feelings and can see what's going on, I mean, it'll break your heart, and I can understand how people just can't take it. And even though in their own professional judgment they feel, although I don't know what kind of training they're getting now, but when I was trained, you have to feel empathy and try and support people, and understand people have problems, but support them through, work them through, and work them to get their children back if their children are taken away, or to keep their children. And this doesn't appear to be happening. They've set rules, and the rules say you take the children first and then you deal with everything after. And then there's nobody around. Sure, how can you have a business? If you have a business, say, making something, and you're sitting there and you haven't got the operatives to make it, how can you run the business? So if you have a business, like child care, whatever you call it, and you have no frontline operatives, how can you run that too? I mean, the system is all wrong. They've more management. In fact, I remember a long time ago when they were changing from, I think it was back into the HSE, from the area social work offices, they discovered they did a whole load of childcare managers. They didn't need it all. They got rid of a load of childcare managers. It's management heavy, and it's totally and absolutely unnecessary. But that's what they do. That's how they control everything, because people's livelihood is depending on it. And I mean, look at the court system. I went through a court system years ago. It wasn't anything like it is now. I mean, the court system is huge. You have absolutely no chance. There's huge amount of lawyers, solicitors, gals, everything, paid huge money, and psychiatrists. And what chance has an individual there trying to have a voice in that? They have absolutely no chance whatsoever. Absolutely none. Everything is against them, and it's huge money. And this is the thing I'm saying. That's what it's about. It's a business. And where is the empathy, and where is the understanding, and where is the rights of the child really in all of this? You know, surely a child has a right to keep contact and get to know and get back with their parents. Surely that's a basic right of any child, and it doesn't appear to be happening in this country.
No, it's not happening, and indeed Kathleen Funchnan, the chair of the Dáil's Children Committee, is on record as saying that since she was first elected, she has never seen a single reunification. And our observations in the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice is that it is extremely rare for reunification to take place. The goalposts keep shifting all of the time. So when a judge sets a date for a reunification, the default position of Tusla is to change the social worker. The new social worker comes in and says, well, all of the reports to date are out of date. I'm new to this case. I'm going to have to order new reports, new assessments. And so the mother finds herself right back at the very beginning again. And it's like a mouse on a hamster wheel, you know. it's really, really shocking. And you mentioned there about it being so adversarial. Like, Tusla is spending tens of millions of euro each year on lawyers and legal fees, and that's on top of their own in-house lawyers. So if there's a full care order, and I've witnessed this myself as a Mackenzie friend for mothers, they will sometimes have no legal representation whatsoever in court, even though that is their legal right. And they will find themselves up against two or three social workers. The social workers are represented by a solicitor, a junior counsel, a senior counsel. The gal is represented by a solicitor and who's briefing either a junior or senior counsel. And then you have a whole range of court experts and so on. Like, as you said, they don't stand a chance.
No, I mean, I've seen that myself when I went one time to court and saw the whole system, the way it worked. And I said, nobody absolutely stands a chance. But see, there's a lot of laws, but very little justice. That's my view in the court system in this country, generally, as far as I can see now, unfortunately. And we didn't have this type of court system when I started off. It was much more simple and you had more direct involvement and all that. But now, and even the parents themselves could actually speak in court. Yeah? But now it's all a big business. It's all a huge, massive, big business. And you have absolutely no chance in that to have any kind of a voice, unfortunately. I'm sad. I would never touch social work now. I wouldn't go near it. And it doesn't surprise me that a lot of people aren't going near it. It's not social work, it's a civil service with a list of instructions on how to do things. So why bother qualifying in a profession if you have a list of instructions and you can't practice the way you feel you should be practicing? What's the point?
Mm-hmm. So you have very young social workers going out into the field, and you could have a 21-year-old from a very middle-class background, having graduated perhaps with first-class honours from one of the universities, going into a very, very, very deprived working-class area where a mother is parenting on her own in extreme poverty, and you have that young, inexperienced social worker using middle-class values to carry out an evaluation on that mother who is actually struggling.
She would have a set of instructions handed to her. The social workers are now handed instructions on the way they have to operate. And if they don't follow those instructions, then they forget about it. Well, life is made very difficult for them, and they know that. So you either go in and you go into the system. You seem to be trained to fit into the system now in many ways. And you go into the system and you give your judgment, and that's it, basically. And the system is there. The system is there basically to take children as a commodity now. As I say, I'm not saying sometimes it isn't necessary, unfortunately, but generally, unfortunately, it's a generalisation now that that's the first thing you do is you take the children, and after that, whatever happens. And it's unfortunate, but that was never the way before. Before it was you keep the children as far as you can, the best you can at home. That's the way I was trained. Now it's you take the children and everything goes beyond that because it's a business. It's lost its any kind of empathy, all that's gone. It's purely a business method, business thinking. Social work doesn't exist in this country. It's a civil service, basically.
Well, one of the issues very, very, very close to my heart is the removal of newborn babies from mothers a couple of days after birth. Tusla cannot make any moves on the mother until after the birth, but the mother will have been told in the run-up to the birth that the child is being taken once it's born. And one of the things that they use is potential, now that's the word potential, future emotional harm or potential future emotional difficulties. And if you look at the animal kingdom, you wouldn't take kittens from a cat after it has given birth, or little puppies from a dog. And, just this thing of removing a newborn baby. In our last podcast, we had Richard Boyd Barrett telling the Dáil on the 2nd of February about the primal wound that he is carrying for the rest of his life, the primal wound of being removed from his mother at birth. And it's becoming very, very prevalent now. Well, at least, we're being contacted by more and more mothers whose newborn babies have been taken from them. So do you have any views on that, Maura?
Well, I think it's appalling. I mean, potential. What's the potential? I mean, it might never happen, whatever they're talking about. Potential? That's ridiculous. I mean, that's criminal, actually, to say potentially, if nothing has happened. They should be there to help the mother care for the child. If there is a problem, then try and resolve that problem and try and get and encourage her and help her and use all the resources to help her keep that child. That's what they should be doing. Instead of taking away on a potential risk. That's, to me, even when you say it, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make sense. But that's because they need a commodity. That's the whole thing of having a commodity, and the commodity are the children. For a whole big... I mean, the court system wouldn't exist unless all these people were going to court. All the private care situations that they're putting children into wouldn't exist unless they had the commodity of the children. So there you are, that's the reason. Potential, use potential as another means of getting children into their own industry.
And of course, all of this is happening under the cloak of secrecy, the veil of secrecy, in-camera rule, where mothers cannot speak about what has happened inside of the family court. And it's very rare for journalists to report on it, because naturally enough, no newspaper or mainstream media outlet can afford these days to send a journalist down to a family court to spend the day there to report on what's actually happening. So, everything is happening in secret. Now, I know, Maura, you have very, very strong views about how the sexual abuse of children is being dealt with at the minute. Typically, if a mother now reports child sex abuse to the guards, it's handed over to Tusla to investigate. It'll end up in the family court. The mother will be accused of a term called parental alienation by an expert who's appointed by the court with the recommendation that custody of the children be given to the perpetrator of the sexual abuse, and the mother is denied all access to her children. What are your views around how child sex abuse is being investigated at the moment?
Well, it's not being investigated properly at all. You just have to look at the whole thing. The recent thing coming up about children being trafficked, and again, and I'm talking about 30 years ago when it was happening, 20 years ago, and when I was on the streets of Dublin it was happening, and it's still happening. So they're not dealing with it at all in an appropriate fashion at all. Clearly they're not dealing with it. And of course, the more kind of thing you're talking about they do, the more people are not going to report it, the more people are going to try and do it in a different way, the more people are going to try and hide away from it and not get help. I mean, I would be very reluctant to go through that system if I was a child that had been sexually abused, given what they're talking about now. I'd be very reluctant to deal with all that in that way. They're not dealing with it properly. They're just not dealing with it properly. It's as simple as that. They should have a proper system set up that children can feel comfortable in going and expressing themselves without having all these criteria laid down before they even get to the door of any establishment that's supposed to help them. It's and of course, the reason that child exploitation goes on is the secrecy. And if you look at when it goes to court, I mean, child abusers get very little sentencing. They seem to get sometimes they get suspended sentencing, and they're walking around all around the place. And you think, what is going on here? And that's my view. We're not dealing with it appropriately at all. It's as bad as it was 20 odd years ago, and it's still going on, and we're clearly not dealing with it. That's why.
Well, in recent days, Childline has published a report, and they're saying that year on year, the number of children contacting the agency in relation to sexual abuse is actually increasing. But if we compare that then to the number of prosecutions for child sex abuse, there seems to be a deficit. There's no correlation between the two.
No. We're not dealing with child sexual abuse properly in this country at all. We never have, and we never will. That's my view of it. Because there are people in powerful positions who, as far as I can see, who seem to be covering up an awful lot, in my opinion. I can only say, I'm saying that now, but that's the way I see it. And so they've established this system that keeps everything hidden. And they use the whole court system to say you can't talk about this and you can't talk about that. And that's a great way to cover up any kind of abuse, including sexual abuse. No, we're not dealing with it.
Well, Maura, it has been a huge honour to chat to you today for this podcast, and I want to thank you most sincerely for the way that you have mentored us in the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice for almost 5 years now, and I just wish you continued good health and hope that you will be working alongside us for many, many more years to come.
Well, thank you, Anna, for talking to me. I'm sorry I didn't come across as very positive of what's going on to one, because I think the whole thing is a shambles. And I'm just feel very sorry for the children in the system and the parents who are trying to get some contact with them, because the system is such a mess. What can I say? We're not doing it at all properly and appropriately. And I wish I could see some light in the future, but I can't at the moment.
Well, Maura, we'll finish on that note. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Maura expressed strong opinions about how Tusla is set up as a business. Lead researcher with the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, Michelle Monaghan, now explains.
The Child and Family Agency was set up under law, the Child and Family Agency Act in 2013, and the use of Tusla's name is used from the 1st of January 2014 as their trading name. Tusla is a registered business name with the company's registration office as a body corporate under Section 4 of the Registration of Business Names Act 1963. The business name registered with the company's registration office is Tusla, and the nature of the business registered with the company's registration office is as follows. Tusla is the name used by the Child and Family Agency established under statute under the Child and Family Agency Act 2013. The Child and Family Agency is now the dedicated state agency responsible for improving well-being and outcomes for children. The Child and Family Agency seek to register the name Tusla as a business name to demonstrate that the name is associated with the agency. Again, the Child and Family Agency was set up under an act in 2013. It traded as Tusla from the 1st of January 2014. However, the interim CEO at the time, Pat Smith, lodged the registration of the business name on the 19th of March 2019, and it was received in the company's registration office on the 25th of April 2019. So we can conclude that Tusla is registered as a business name with the company's registration office.
Justice for Birth Mothers is a co-production between the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice and 𝑀 Media. The podcast series received no funding and is made possible by a team of volunteers. Thank you for listening, and please share this podcast with your family, friends and contacts. Our next podcast deals with shame and suicide. Until next time, Beannacht 𝐽𝑢𝑠𝑡𝑖𝑐𝑒 go léir.
In the land where I was born, there are now women seeking justice. Justice for birth mothers. Oh Lord, hear